The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this Change Board webinar, Social Recruiting in the Public Sector, sponsored by Oracle. My name is Mary Appleton, and I'm Change Board's Acting Editor here in the UK. We're delighted to be joined here today by Debbie Smith, Head of Client Services, and Christophe Mallet, Head of Strategy at Carve Consulting, who are going to talk about the impact of social technologies on employer brands, the role of communities in identifying and engaging talent, and how your current employees can influence social conversations, specifically in the public sector. Before we begin, I'd like to run through a few guidelines. Throughout the webinar, if you'd like to pose a question or a comment to Debbie or Christophe, please enter this in the box on the right-hand side of your screen and click Send. We'll be taking questions at several points during the presentation after each section, and we'll try to get through as many as we can, so please do feel free to pose your question at any time. We'll also be running a live Twitter feed throughout the webinar, so be sure to credit your tweets with the following hashtag, CBWeb. That's hashtag CBWeb. We'll also be recording the webinar, so we'll send you a link to the full recording in the next few days. Okay, so I'd like to hand over to Debbie. Just a bit of introduction about Carve. Carve is a strategic social media consultancy who offer research-led training and advice to organisations to help them understand the business value of social media, how to maximise social networks, and how they can use social tools effectively to boost employer brand, business performance, and engagement. Over to you, Debbie.
Thank you very much, Mary, and welcome everybody. So as Mary said, this webinar is going to be in 3 sections. We're going to start off looking at reputation, we're going to then look at relationships and communities, and we're going to end with referrals and advocacy. But first of all, we want to start with a poll and get a little bit of understanding about how you are using social.
So I think this poll is really simple, Debbie. Simple question. It's Chris here, by the way. Do you understand LinkedIn when it comes to recruitment for yourself? And I'm asking because I think it's important to know whether you understand it to then discuss how your organizations can go about using it. So we are going to give you a few more seconds, as only 50% of you have voted still. Interestingly enough, over a third of you say they're not sure, and 15% that they don't. So over 50% of you basically don't really know about LinkedIn recruitment. 50% of you know about it. So it's going to be quite an interesting session because you are a divided audience, so I'm expecting an interesting dialogue. 88% of you have voted now, so I'm going to close the poll and share the results with you. As you can see, basically half and half yes and half either no or I'm not sure. So let's move to the next slide. The reason why I asked you this is because the COSLA, which is the Confederation of Scottish Local Authorities, has been asking the exact same question to a number of organizations from the public and the private sector. And as you can see, the public sector is lagging behind. Only 32% say that yes, versus 41% for the private sector. So it shows that the public sector is lagging behind. That's why today we're going to look at the very best case studies and examples that we could find in the public sector, but also in leading private sector companies. But that's a static view of things. Okay, the public sector is lagging behind, but how are things evolving really? So there's this second question on the left of the slide, which is about, are you ready to embrace social media for recruitment purposes? Interestingly enough, 12% of public sector companies say we have no intention of using it, but 0% of private sector companies. So there is definitely a cluster of people who are against change. But what's the key takeaway here is that 44% are aware of it, might want to explore it, and 16% are keen to explore it as soon as possible, but need to learn. So there is definitely a need for public sector organizations to just get to know more, so they can launch this strategy that they want. So the first thing to do when it comes to using social media for a strategy is to maybe try to listen to conversation. Is there anything going on about you and your organization online? So, Debbie?
That's right. What a lot of organisations say is, well, there aren't people talking about us, or they don't realise that there's conversations happening. And here on this slide, we can see that there's a snapshot of just a few examples which we've shown you, which we've picked out. In the middle of this slide, the little box that says audience is actually something we've taken from LinkedIn, and that shows there's 449,000 members on LinkedIn working in the public sector, be that in law enforcement, public safety, policy, government administration, or the forces. So that's a significant number of people on just one platform alone on LinkedIn. And then around that, we've got a couple of examples of tweets and messages, which are conversations people are having around public sector organisations. So, for example, on the bottom left-hand corner, you can see a tweet from Miko Lahio, I think, Lahio one, and that's a retweet. So the BBC tweeted about a marketing officer vacancy, and this guy here has chosen, off his own back, to retweet that and to share that with his own network. On the top right-hand corner, for example, there's a tweet there from Anine Means-Hines, and that's just an example of somebody who's saying they'll probably volunteer for Oxfam and may do that again. And that's somebody showing intent and engaging with an employer brand, and that is an absolute signal to start to engage.
Exactly. Another example on the top left. On Exwido, there's been a coup by the British Army in Bristol. By coup, I mean recruitment event. That's a display of negativity. There might be an opportunity to maybe, bring together Claire M. Bunting, who says like big shout to all the boys in Iraq, with on Exwido. The idea here is really simple: is people, individuals, are talking about your organization or competitor organization or the recruitment in your industry, in your vertical, online, all the time, in dynamic conversations, and you just simply cannot ignore this. But the amount of information you get about you is fairly limited in terms of the richness of content. So is there any way, Debbie, of maybe getting more on social about who you are?
Absolutely. In the recruitment space, we have what we refer to as review sites. They're very similar to what we're probably all familiar with, TripAdvisor. If you're going on holiday, very few of us these days would actually book a holiday without checking TripAdvisor. So review sites, career review sites, are very, very similar in terms of platforms, and they offer an opportunity for anybody to make a comment about their employer. And these are growing in popularity. They're very popular in the States and growing in popularity in the UK. So these are real-time conversations, real-time comments from your employees, commenting on anything from the style of leadership, working hours, salaries, or management styles, for example. But more importantly, there's also an opportunity for people who are going through the recruitment process with your organisation, and they leave comments on there around the interview process, the application process, and that kind of feedback is really rich information, and something which you should be acting upon and using to refine your recruitment processes and your employee feedback.
Exactly. So as you can see maybe here in fine print, there's over 120 reviews about what it's like to work for the BBC. There's over 150 salary reviews. There are reviews about the CEO, the difficulty of interview, etc. It's an extremely rich amount of information for you to understand better how people within your organization perceive your organization. That's better than an employee survey, really. But when you do an employee survey, you only do it for your own company. Where Glassdoor and similar websites are really powerful is that you can get the same information for your competitors and other people in the industry. So you want to see how people perceive your interview process versus your competitor's interview process and your CEO and working. So that's all really interesting. And this leads me to the next slide, which is about the rise of the social candidates. Just like you had the rise of the web candidates about 10 years ago, going on job boards, switching from newspapers to job boards. But right now, the candidate journey is changing. People are looking for jobs online, but they are also looking for jobs socially, which means that they are going to talk to each other just to gather information, to exchange impressions and recommendations and introductions, etc. So of course, on one side, you have the rise of the social EVP, which means that you are going to have your own channels, your Facebook careers page, your Twitter feed, the LinkedIn careers page or group, which is all good. But actually, what's really interesting when looking at social recruitment is to know about the rise of the employer reputation, to know that people are talking about you online through reviews, through word of mouth, peer-to-peer recommendation on chat, and that's really where you want to go. Interestingly enough as well, this ER, this employer reputation, is more powerful, more impactful on the candidate journey than the EVP. Why? Well, simply because the ER is like you talking to someone sitting down at a table. It's transparent, it's reliable, it's personal, it's relevant. It's just much more authentic, much more impactful than any forms of ads or corporate content.
So we can see, Chris, that all these conversations are really impacting employer brands and therefore your brands as an employer. So how should this information be used by organisations in the public sector, Chris?
So something that's interesting, if you look on the right, we mapped the candidate journey. So you're going to start as a passive job seekers because you have a job, not really looking around, and then slightly turn into a tiptoer, opening your eyes and ears about what's happening maybe in the industry, starting to choose companies you would like to work for, and then finally you're going to become an active job seeker, start targeting these companies, these precise jobs, and finally be an employee. But in terms of this employer reputation information, it goes exactly the other way around. Your employees are the people who hold the real information. How it is to work for you on a daily basis. It is worth it or not worth it? Is it good or not? Is the EVP really true, or is it just a bunch of illusions? And these employees are going to communicate this information to their peers and friends and active job seekers, really, people who ask for that information. And then this spreads into the tiptoe community, people who are starting to research companies and compare them, and then to the general reputation within the passive job seekers community. So it is extremely interesting that you understand how an employer reputation is created, but also the fact that job seekers, if you're trying to target job seekers with your own messaging, it's probably already too late. They probably have decided already, based on your reputation, whether you are a good employer or not. So just to summarize again the power of ER versus EVP. Well, the EVP is scripted. That's something that has been through internal comms, etc., for months and months. The reach is most times going to be paid for via magazines and websites, and it's static. It's something that you put there and hope that it catches, and it's going to stay there sometimes for a few months before anything changes. Whereas the employer reputation, the conversations you can have with all of those people are authentic, they're dynamic, and they're organic. So that's really the first point to understand. When it comes to reputation, the difference between the two and the importance it might have. So that's the end of part number one. If you have any questions specifically about that part, we have a couple of minutes maybe to answer them. Otherwise, we'll move forward to part two. So I'll wait for about a minute for your questions here.
Okay, hi Christophe, it's Mary.
Hi Mary.
We've got a couple of questions come in. I've got a question actually. As an employer, you talked a lot about review sites. How would you go about finding those review sites, and how can you monitor whether you're featured on them or not? Is it a case of literally just scouring the web on a daily basis?
Well, a daily basis might be a bit too high a frequency, but it's just like TripAdvisor. So if you were running a hotel, you would look regularly at TripAdvisor, Yelp, and Google reviews, for example. In the same way, Glassdoor is by far the biggest website here in the UK, but you also want to look at Career Bliss, for example, or if you're hiring graduates and interns at Rate My Placement. So you just would go about it as anything else, just Google review sites in your industry and have a process in place whereby maybe every month you look for new reviews.
And on all those sites, it is worth mentioning, Mary, that there are opportunities to enhance your presence and to have enhanced profiles as you would on any kind of website. But it's really those authentic conversations you're looking to monitor on a regular basis.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, great. Another question coming from Angela, who says, my organisation has no social footprint so far, whether it's for EVP or via people's conversations. So how can I use social media to inform my strategy?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's going to be the case that for some of you, if not most, you are not the BBC or the British Army. You're simply not as big. So you're not going to get the same volume. But what's really interesting about the employer reputation is this is public data about everyone. So you can look at similar organizations, whether it's competitors' company or partners. You can look at successful employers in your region, for example, or in your vertical area. And by looking at this, you will get a feel of what candidates are maybe looking for in an organization, what type of EVP really resonates with them.
Okay, fantastic. That's great. Thanks.
All right, are we ready to move to part 2, Mary?
Yes, we are.
Brilliant. Let's go for it then.
Okay. So part 2 is really when we're looking at communities and building relationships. So what we mean by community, we're going to have a think about why communities are important and how they should dictate your strategy. But we're going to start with a poll first. Now this poll question might be a little complex. Just bear with me a second. The chances are you've probably got a Facebook profile. Just by sheer numbers in the UK, there's a high probability you will. You're also very likely, just by virtue of the fact that you're on this call and you're in a sort of professional environment, that you have a profile on LinkedIn. And you may possibly also have a Twitter account. But out of all of your personal profiles on social networks, where do you have the largest community? So I, for example, have over 500 connections on LinkedIn. I've got just under 500 followers on Twitter, and unusually quite low, I've only got 213 friends on Facebook. I think, Chris, yours is quite different.
I have 1,000 friends on Facebook, but I don't want to judge your social life at all. I think it's just interesting to know not only where you act the most, where your biggest circle of contacts is, but also simply to realize that you are active in different networks, in different channels, saying different things, but it's still you and you're still interested in the same thing. So 76% of you have voted, and I'm going to close the poll now and share the results with you. And the results are quite interesting because 70% of you have more LinkedIn contact than anything else, which is not surprising because you're in the HR industry. Yet some people still have more on Facebook, and some have even more followers on Twitter, which means that as soon as you are above 200, 300 followers on Twitter, you are actually quite influential. So that means 6% of you are actually very, very influential. Let's have a look at what it means to be acting on both LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook in terms of communities. What you see here in this complicated graph is basically saying, as an individual, you might be you might be active in different dimensions. One is in your social graph, which is social graph is who you know, is your friends and family. And typically, you would think, well, that's Facebook. That could be Ren if you were in China. On the other side, you've got the professional network. So you're all on LinkedIn, or most of you are on LinkedIn. This could be Xing in Germany, Viadeo in France, etc. And finally, some of you might be on Twitter, might have or read Tumblr blogs, might be on Pinterest, and where you're following everything from the crisis in Ukraine, the Sochi video game, the Brit Awards, influencers in your industry, etc. So what we call the interest graph, what you're interested in. So that's the first view, and it does make sense, but actually, if you think about it, when you go on Facebook, you get a lot of news from brands, from newspapers that you subscribe to. When you are on Tumblr or Twitter, you might actually build relationships with friends that have blogs and talk directly to those people. You might follow company news and professionally relevant news. And on professional networks as well, you do get news, you do get social with people that you might necessarily use as business opportunities right now. So what this means is, despite what most people think, a social media strategy should not apply only in the professional networks, because there is a way to reach people around what they want to say, around what interests them in other networks. I think Debbie now is going to illustrate that point.
Yeah, so we've got some examples here, and we've used the NHS as an example of some communities, all NHS related. So on the left, looking at the social graph, we've got at the top, we've got a Facebook group for nurses. On the bottom, there's Nurses Reconnected, which is similar to the old Friends Reunited, if you like. And if you think about it, nurses often working on different wards, or they're going from ward to ward or hospital to hospital, so that they're designed to keep in touch with people you might work with. At the top, on the interest graph, we've got a blog, what we call Nursing, which blogs around some current issues and challenges in the NHS and what it's like working for the NHS. And on the right-hand side, we've got a professional graph. We've got a LinkedIn group. This is quite an interesting one, actually. This is a LinkedIn group which was set up by an individual recruiter, obviously working in NHS recruitment. And he wanted a place where his connections could talk to each other and could network with each other. But actually what that's ended up doing is building a group of 13,000 people that he can connect with very easily, and that's quite a strong and thriving network.
Exactly. So the opportunity here is, of course, if you are in the NHS networking area on LinkedIn, you can afford to be really professional and talk about the industry and eventually push job opportunities. But you might also get in contact with whoever is writing the what we call nursing blog, because this has a huge following, and you might build something with them. If you're on Facebook in a group, you're going to be much more personal, because these are going to be people you know, on Nurses Reconnected as well. So you can act on different channels. And there was a quick remark saying that in the poll it didn't mention Pinterest and networks like these on purpose, because otherwise I would have added 12 networks and it would have had really complicated options for entering. But that's a really good point, actually. We mentioned Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn because you all know them and it's easier for examples. But as you've seen yesterday, WhatsApp was bought for 16 billion by Facebook. Snapchat is growing, Instagram is growing, Pinterest is. There's new networks like Whisper and Rando and things like this. So there are a lot of networks. But I don't want to make this training about which network is the best. This training is about understanding what networks are all about, how people work, what kind of social interaction happen on networks, and how you can harness this social behavior to talk about your story.
So Chris, what do all these communities, what do they mean to employers?
Well, one way to look at it, if you look, for example, still on that slide at the NHS, Nurse Reconnected, and the blog, none of those really belong to you as an NHS recruiter. So that's a new way of looking at your network. That's basically saying you have your own network. You're going to have your Pinterest page, your Facebook careers page, etc. Your LinkedIn, your Twitter feed, your website, your blog. But actually, the size of the audience on these is fairly limited, and these are people who are already interested. So not really the people you want to target. But what we saw during the first 2 slides is that there are a lot of people who are talking about you or about your competitors or about your cause or about your industry in neutral places, in groups, on Twitter, etc. And the size of this audience is much bigger than the size of your audience on own network. So you have to consider neutral networks and to get in there, listen to what people say, and join the conversation when you can. Of course, paid networks, so paid advertising, Google AdWords, Facebook, Twitter promoted, etc., will help you target your message to these people in these neutral communities and targeting extremely precisely. Finally, there is the individual circle that's slightly outside, and we'll get into more details when we reach the third part. But the idea here is that you know the true torchbearers and holders of your employer reputation are your employees. And your employees, just like you, they are on LinkedIn, they are on Facebook, they might be on Twitter, they have connections. They know people from the same university, they know people that they work together at the same company. So these networks are full of people you want to reach, but you can't. What you can do is reach them through your own place. So the power of individual networks is going to be covered in the last part. Debbie, I believe you've got an example, but first let me give you an example about what it means. So all of the followings are about the British Army. Paid. When you Google Army jobs, the first thing you get is an ad on Google. The reason for that is you don't want to be found for something like the tweet we saw before saying there was a coup in Bristol by the army. You want you want to be found for the right thing, especially on SEO. On the right, you have an example of neutral networks. So 2 people saying, "I'm ready to join," or "I have sent an application." These are stories that you can use. These are real stories for real people that you can use in your communication, and you can talk directly to these people, thank them, congratulate them, and maybe get them, turn them into advocates for them to convince their friends and share good news with their friends.
Yeah, and here's a couple of examples of, again, from the British Army. And the one on the left is on their own network. So @Army Jobs is their Twitter stream. And it's actually a very good example of an owned channel. And they tweet a mix of interviews from serving personnel, recruitment events, their campaign videos. They obviously have a lot of video content. But also just more general news. So, for example, this week they're tweeting about Army members who are at Team GB at the Winter Olympics. So that's an example of the content which they control on their owned channel. And then on the right, we've got some earned content, and that's an example of a tweet which was sent by Army Jobs from their Twitter account. But you can see at the bottom, just highlighted in red there, that's been retweeted 11 times and favorited 7 times. So that amplified the broadcast message from the own Twitter accounts, and people off their own back who are following that have decided to share that with their own networks.
Exactly. So let's have a look now maybe at another example in the public sector, and going back to the NHS, because of course it's all beautiful, but how do you get about having your recruiters, having people internally buy in a social recruiting strategy? So example of the NHS, you can see the briefing from November past year, and that's using social media in your recruitment process guide. That's for managers, and it says what we said before. It says, well, down with the traditions. It's not about only job boards anymore. This goes beyond. You have to bring your personality forward. You have to go talk to the candidates where they are. You have Andrew Fisher's Twitter profile here. He brings the face to the organization, and he's got almost 2,000 followers, which is which is quite impressive, really. I have a question here that I had 2 minutes ago. I will answer it now. Can you show a list of sites where you can monitor organizations? Unfortunately, I cannot go live on internet right now. But the first thing I would do is simply to draft a list of, let's say, your top 10 competitors or top 10 people you want to monitor, and next to it, draft a list of networks where you think they might be. So LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Glassdoor, Pinterest, etc. And then I would go about finding them there. Then there is a whole raft of social media tools that you can use to make that monitoring process automatic, such as Google Alerts that you can set up for any query, or social media monitoring tools, such as Hootsuite. But I'm happy to provide you with a list maybe after the webinar. Back to the slide. The NHS has a strategy in place that covers broadcasting jobs. Of course, we're not telling you to stop pushing your jobs, but also proper narratives around the recruitment, showing the EVP on social media, advocacy programs we will talk about, and paid advertising. So it's all integrated between social media and other channels. One even more precise example, still from the NHS, is the Graduate Management Training Scheme, which was voted best use of social media in the public sector. And what they did, primarily on their Facebook page, which had 10,000 likes, and on their Twitter account, they opened it, which has 5,000 followers. They opened it to discussions. They decided to bring together the staff and the candidates. So they had live Q&As, they had chats, they give a lot of updates, tips, and advice. So rather than pushing jobs and say, apply and wait for the results, they say, we're going to be helpful. We're going to help you maximize the chances of getting the scheme, and we're also going to open a window into the organization so you know exactly what you're getting into. So for part 2, Debbie, I think that's it.
Yeah, I think so. So we've had a look at the types of communities that can impact organisations, not just professional communities, where most social recruiting activity starts. And I suppose the key message is that it's crucial that you consider the other social and interest graphs in your strategy too. So are there any questions around any of those communities or anything we've talked about?
Hi, we've got one question come through actually from John, who's saying Twitter Q&As can go horribly wrong. How can you make sure to create a vibrant and positive discussion?
Yeah, it's a really good remark. You might have followed the Ask JP Morgan or the McDonald's scandal that went horribly wrong.
And British Gas.
And British Gas as well. Yeah. And that's a lack of discerning what the purpose of the Q&A is. I think if you open a Q&A to say ask anything about recruitment, you're going to open to complaints and negativity. If you open a Q&A saying meet John, who is our head of graduates scheme in this hospital, or someone at the BBC has got a great job, or pretty much anyone in the army, meet someone and ask them any question about what the job really is like, then you only get people who are positively curious and want to ask questions, as opposed to opening a new channel for complaints.
I think that's right, and I think it's also important, like with any social media, to have a clear purpose to your strategy, but also to have really robust processes in place to deliver on that strategy. So, you know, with everything that we do for our clients, we always have a very clear escalation process. We will have put a lot of thought into frequently asked questions. What happens if somebody asks something negative? Where do we escalate that to? How might we respond? So it's about being prepared and having those processes in place to back up something like a Twitter chat.
Thanks, Debbie. Unless there's any other question, we're going to move into the third and last part of the webinar.
Is there anything else, Mary?
Okay, no, that's fantastic.
Okay.
All right. Okay, so let's move forward.
So number 3 is when we're looking at the sort of advocacy and referrals in our third part. So advocacy is a very well used term. So what do we mean about when we refer to advocacy? Can't even say it now. In the terms of social recruiting.
Well, first I'm going to ask you a question, and used to it. This is going to be a poll. So let me select it and share it with you right now. And I want to ask you, in your organization, when it comes to using social media to talk about your organization, how does this work? Is this explicitly forbidden? You don't talk about it? Is this encouraged via guidelines and training and support? Or is there actually not much happening and it's unclear and a bit chaotic and it's not regulated or monitored in any ways? So I'm seeing quite a good percentage. It's actually encouraged, which is really showing that you're happy to harness your employees, and that's a really good start for what's coming right now. I'm going to close the poll now and share those results with you. So almost 2/3 say that using social media is encouraged for employees to share content about the company, and only 1/3 say it's not monitored. Actually, that's quite good. Only few of you said it's explicitly forbidden. I have Andrew again, who says unregulated doesn't mean chaotic. It means that it's authentic. It's a good point. I think what I meant maybe was when it's encouraged via guidelines and training, as we will see, we do not necessarily provide a really strict guidelines. We provide a framework for people to express themselves. What you want to give them is confidence to not being afraid of messing things up. For example, so not necessarily regulated, but at least it has been sought after by someone in the organization at some point. So let's move to advocacy. Well, what's the primary definition of advocacy, maybe, Debbie?
Well, I think in terms of social recruiting, a strategy around employee advocacy in social recruiting really means harnessing the social networks of your employees and giving them the permission and the tools to use their own personal networks to share job content and promote your employer messages.
Exactly. I mean, we've seen it before. Your employees, and this is quite intuitive, they own your ER really, and they are the most powerful torchbearers of the EVP. Yet, despite 62% apparently being encouraged to share, only 5% of employees do it on a regular basis. And the usual roadblocks are lack of social media governance, lack of access to tools, and that might just be an IT policy, and most importantly, a lack of knowledge, a lack of confidence, a fear really of doing something that might be seen as a waste of time, as potentially harmful, etc. So let's have a look at an example from the private sector. And that's Deloitte.
Yeah, this is an example, and it is from the private sector, but it's a very sort of very simple but very effective example, we think. And this is a very simple plugin which Deloitte shared with their employees, which enables their employees to connect to their personal profile on Facebook and link to their personal networks to share job content. Now, we all know with employee referral schemes, one of the challenges is keeping that front of mind for employees and keeping that momentum going. And this aims and is very effective at keeping allowing employees to share that job content on a platform they're on day to day, i.e. Facebook or LinkedIn. It's very simple, and it's basically based on you employ good people and they know good people, so good people know good people. And this is just simplifying the process and giving them, more importantly, the permission to do that day to day.
Exactly, and Deloitte, they have a lot of graduate activity, for example, and the graduates you recruit know people in their school or university who are equally good. These people want to be referred by a friend rather than apply like everyone else. So it's really a match made in heaven, and it's really cost efficient. Let's look at another example, which is 4Talent. What 4Talent did is they decided that they should be so proud of their employees that there wasn't any reason why their employees shouldn't be effectively the recruiters for the organizations. So they have opened a blog for employees who want to participate. They have made employees managers of the Facebook page, of the Twitter channel, and for example, they said to people, well, Priscilla, Deborah, Jamie, Gabby, if you want to talk about your jobs, if you want to talk about how it is to work for us, if you're proud, well, feel free to open your account, use the 4Talent brand, the imagery, and talk about who you are. And that's very efficient because it gives a face to the organization. As for the central account at 4Talent, it has 43,000 followers, which is huge. And if you look at the activity, they spend a lot of time replying to candidates, replying to people, directing them to Deborah or Jamie or the blog, etc. And they're really creating a feeling of belonging, a feeling of working together, rather than this recruitment pressure that some companies sometimes put on the candidate.
Yeah, and this is another example. This is actually something we did for BBC Future Media, and this is a toolkit. What you're actually looking at there is a toolkit. And the idea was that they'd actually created a community, they'd chosen, if you like, a network of champions internally. And this toolkit was designed to just outline some very simple ways for them to get involved and to share their experiences of working life at BBC Future Media, and to give them some suggestions on content, how they might do that, how often they might do that, and the type of wording they must use. So it was really giving them the framework, but also the freedom and encouraging them to go ahead and share that. And that's really important because often when we talk to clients about, or organisations about advocacy, people just don't know what to write or where the boundaries are and what the limits are, because they're not necessarily outlined in their social guidelines.
And I think that exactly follows Andrew's remark. Give people the confidence, the enthusiasm, and they will build it for you much better than you could. Some people say, well, okay, it's a good idea, advocacy, but really, how many people can I reach? Is it that important? Is it more simple if I just stay on my Facebook page and my own Twitter channel rather than asking people internally? I want to have a quick look at some numbers, okay? So as I said before, no, as I haven't said before actually, 5% of people currently share, but 29%, according to the same study, are willing to share. Let's look at the NHS. NHS has 90,000 followers on LinkedIn, 56,000 likes on Facebook, 117,000 followers on Twitter. That's a bit more than 250,000 in terms of potential audience on owned networks. It's good, it's a good figure, but let's have a look at advocacy, and I'm just looking at LinkedIn. I'm not even looking at any Twitter or Facebook. I'm just saying there's 76,000 employees of the NHS on one of the pages of LinkedIn, and on average 29% of these people are going to be willing to share, but they have 200 connections. So if you do the math, that's 4.5 million compared to 250,000. So the potential for that is huge. I hope by now that you get a bit more if you had about the opportunities and reach and the numbers. But I want maybe as a final slide to have a look at a few points that you might have to go through when building a strategy. Before I show you that slide, I just want to say this is by no means a copy and paste strategy. There's no such thing as an ideal strategy that would work for every company. This is just by experience something that seems to work as an indicative roadmap for where to start and where to go.
Yeah. And I think, Chris, you're absolutely right. But in our experience, the logical place to start is by identifying what we call MVPs, your most visible people. And they aren't necessarily the most, the people within the organisation who are heads of department or whatever. They're people who are most visible to their own communities and who potential candidates will be interested in speaking to. They might be working in a very small department but have a very specialist skill. So they're often in organisations perhaps where you have challenges with finding those scarce skills. But they may well be someone who blogs in your organisation or has their own sort of community as well. And that's a very logical place to start, by identifying those MVPs and building an internal community.
And remember, from identifying your MVPs, but also from monitoring conversations online and reviews on Glassdoor, you're going to get a better idea of who you really are. And now it's time to build content. What content do you want people, your MVPs, to share with their network? Something that they feel comfortable with, but that you also feel is communicating the true identity of the company. So you're going to create a content strategy, and that does not mean one video, 5 tweets, 10 LinkedIn updates, and that's it. It's going to mean guidelines. What's the direction? What's the theme for BBC? Let's get the world's attention. Just a guideline like this, something to build momentum. Once you have that, you're going to build a toolkit for them. So you might have some content and say, feel free to share this or this or this. We have great resources, but also use this hashtag, use this catchphrase. Don't hesitate to refer people back to the blog, etc. So give this toolkit to your MVP, and if needed, the next step is training. Some might say, well, I want to share, I'm happy to share, I have expertise, I have networks, but I'm not too sure about how you should write a blog, I'm not too sure about how you should share a tweet. So you might have a training step. Once everyone is happy, excited, ready to go, it's a matter of launching that. That's a lot of internal comms to get your MVPs and to get the buy-in from management, and there might be some external comms as well. Once it's ongoing, of course, you want to monitor what's being said by MVPs and by people they interact with. Monitor the results. How does this drive candidates? Does this drive better candidates or slightly different candidates? And finally, refine and expand. Maybe refine the content and expand. Identify new MVPs, create new content, and so on and so forth. So an advocacy strategy is never finished. It's always a work in progress. But you should start seeing results quite quickly when you launch it. I think maybe that's it for us for part 3.
Yeah, that's all our slides. So the final part was around the referrals. Do we have any questions?
Yeah, we've had a few questions come in actually, guys. Carol wants to know, employee advocates, do they get financial payments? What's in it for them?
Okay, so no, they don't get financial payments ever. Just like as parents, you don't get financial payments for posting pictures of your baby on Facebook. You do it because you do it because you're proud, because you want to show it. What's in it for them? I think the mechanism of sharing in basic psychology gives you a social reward. You get you get serotonin and dopamine from sharing. So basically, these people want to be seen as representative of an organization. Imagine you're not on the top of the pyramid, but you are the face of the British Army, you are the face of BBC Future Media on social networks because you have a great story to share. That will make you proud. So in our experience, when you identify most visible people, you then have to filter them and choose which ones are really motivated and want to genuinely do it because they feel like it.
Yeah, and I think just to underline that, what really resonates on social is the authenticity. If you start rewarding people and paying, then that makes it non-authentic and forced, and that's really not the purpose of that. So that's a very important point.
Absolutely, okay. sorry, go on.
No, I think I can see the next question from Andrew again. Thanks, Andrew, for participating so much. By asking your MVPs to communicate your message, are you asking them to compromise their relationships with their followers? Well, if the toolkit doesn't allow for freedom, if it's too direct, if it's like use this tweet and do this and do that, that's exactly what's going to happen, and that's why your advocates are not really going to advocate you. It's going to sound fake, and it's just not going to work. I think what you really want to do is to allow your MVP to tell their stories, to tell how their jobs really are, and to use your resources if they want to. If they want to use the hashtag, if they want to use the Cancer Research Marathon video that you did, for example, or that nice infographic about your company, or that company picture, etc. And just telling them, you've been identified as someone who's got influence. You told us that you're proud of working for us and that you want to share content. If you need any support, whether it's technical, if you need or for content, we're here to help you, and the rest really is up to you. So I think exactly, Andrew, it's about freeing them, giving them the tools and confidence, and certainly not try to make them paid recruiters, for example.
Okay. I've got a question actually. If you're a smaller organisation, that doesn't perhaps have the brand value of some of the organisations we've talked about today, or you might not have, the budget or the resource to put into employee advocacy schemes, for example, what are your tips? Where might those organisations start with this?
But I think, it really depends on how small you're talking about. It might actually be easier in small organizations because generally the EVP and the company identity is less diluted because people do work in the same place or a limited number of places, and they do know each other a lot. So in our experience, it's actually easier to build content that rings true, and the EVP is less formal. It's less formal and it's less different from the reality. I think the tip is to start by raising a question, bringing people in, ask them if they would be interested, if they think it's a good idea. Because if you don't have their buy-in, you can't force it. This will never work. So get, as in any change strategy, get the few people, even if it's one or two, get a few people in your organization who usually like to change things. The first to adopt new technologies, the first to talk about changing processes. These guys are traditionally more likely to adopt a new approach. Bring these guys in, give them the tools, the resources, even if it's just for one or two, and then these guys are going to convince more people internally about the fact that it's worth it, it's nice, it doesn't take so long, it's not so complicated, and your army, if you want, or your team of advocates is going to grow organically from these primary MVPs.
Okay, and on MVPs then, how would you go about identifying the most visible people? Do they have to be someone who's in the HR function already, or recruitment function, or how would you identify those?
Okay, so two things. One thing is they don't have to be in the HR or recruitment function, but because your recruiters are ultimately going to be the ones talking to candidates at some point, you want them to bring their personality forward. So you want them to have a good LinkedIn profile, if they use Twitter, to have a coherent Twitter profile, and to bring the personality forward. But when it comes to most visible people, it can be people who in the organizations are already talking about it without any support or guidelines, and say, you're talking about it, let us help you do better. Or it can be people who you think, because they have a lot of visibility in the network, and I mean real-life network, because they are experts, because there are people employees look up to generally. You might bring them in and say, would you be interested in becoming an ambassador of the company on social network as well as on conferences like you do today? So the MVPs is not only people who are the most visible today, but also people who you think have the best potential visibility.
Okay, fantastic. Well, that concludes all the questions that have come through. Thank you very much, Christophe and Debbie, for a very insightful presentation. I think a lot of organisations can be nervous around using social media and social strategy because you can't control what people say about you online. But I think it's important, as you said, to get the right processes in place and be prepared for all eventualities. And as with the Deloitte and Full Talent examples, empowering your current employees and giving them permission to talk about you authentically online. So, just a reminder, everyone, that we'll be sending the recorded version of this webinar in the next couple of days, so please do look out for that. And once again, thank you very much for taking the time to join us today, to Carve Consulting and to our sponsors, Oracle. We look forward to seeing you on another Change Board webinar very soon. Have a very good afternoon.